Today we're building a responsive header section for our full stack Nextjs application. Our header will not only have a mobile and desktop view, but on scroll, the background color will dynamically change to transparent. In addition to, we'll add a cool hover effect using Tailwindcss. So if this is something you think you'll be interested in building, stay tuned and I'm gonna walk you through it step by step on how I set it up. So to kick us off, we have as a Nextjs 14 application. Within our page.js file, we've removed the default boiler code that came within the Next app and replaced it with a function named homepage to represent the homepage of our layout. Within the global.css, we've removed the default code within it and just added some basic structure to the HTML body and root element to set the height of the screen to 100%. Within the layout.js, I've gone ahead and updated the title to reflect the name of the application, which is the training land. I've also added a custom fave icon so that we no longer have the default one provided by Next. And last but not least, within the root directory, added a new folder named public since the latest version of Nextjs doesn't have the public directory. And within it, just added a logo that's going to represent the logo of the training land website. So to kick us off, let's go ahead and begin by setting up a header for our landing page. This header will be different than the one that we'll use once the user is authenticated and within the training land dashboard and environment, if you will. To give you an idea of what we'll be building, here we have the desktop version with a header. Within it, we have a nav element that only takes up a maximum width of the large viewport, and we set the margin to be auto so that it is centered. On the far left, we have the logo and the name of our website. And on the right, we have links that will link us to various sections within the landing page. So we'll have a program section, which will list the programs of our application, a gallery section, and also a calculator section where the user can calculate their BMI at no additional cost. They could do it on our website. So to help us out with the structure of the application, I've added a directory named landing and enclosed it in parentheses so that it is going to hold all of the landing page content. I went ahead and added a custom or a different layout.js file. And I've also moved the page.js that was within the app folder inside of the landing folder so that it is now acting as the home page within the landing directory. So this will be our landing page, if you will. So now within the landing folder, let's add another directory named components, but with the components folder, instead of just typing in components, let's start out with a underscore and then type components. Within components, let's add a folder named header, and within components, we'll add another folder named footer. We'll add a directory named hero. We'll add another directory named program. Let's add a folder named gallery. And then last but not least, within components, let's add another folder named calculator. So the first thing that we want to do to get us started is let's go ahead and have a header displayed onto the screen. So within the header directory, let's add a file named header.js. And to create a component, I'm going to use the RFCE shortcut within Visual Studio Code, and it's going to automatically create a const named header. I'm just going to replace the header that's already listed there and retype it in, but just be sure to give this one a capital H. Once we have this arrow function created, let's save the file. And within the landing directory, let's click on the layout.js. And within the layout, let's just go ahead and bring in the header so that we can have it on screen. And the way that we can do so by utilizing a little shortcut is if we use the less than sign and a capital H and begin to type out header. You'll notice that one of the options is going to be /_component/header. That's where we have our header currently created. So we'll go ahead and import it within this file, and it is going to be self-closing. So if we save the file, we'll notice that we now have the header on the screen, which is great. So now that we have the header on the screen, let's go ahead and update the overall layout. So within the main div that's inside of the return statement, let's give it a class name and some styling, and we'll say the minimum height is going to be the screen. We'll give it a direction of flex. We'll add flex to set the direction, and the direction that we want is column. So let's go ahead and save it, and you won't notice any changes just yet, but that's okay. So we're going to keep the header where it is located because we want this header to be consistent on all pages, and we're going to give it a unique styling. But for right now, we do want to style the children that are going to be presented below or within the layout. But we do want to style the children that'll be utilizing this particular layout. So let's go ahead and copy the children. Once we've copied it, go ahead and delete it. And then let's add in a main HTML tag, paste in the children. And inside of the main, let's give it a class name of flex1, flex, and then flex column. This particular section of the div, it's going to allow it to take up the most space based upon the size of the other items that are outside of this layout. So if we gave this a background color just to see what it looks like, and we set the background color to orange, you'll notice that it is taking up the entire height of the screen because we set the flex to 1. So go ahead and remove the background color of green for right now, and we'll save this file. So now let's go ahead and close out the layout.js because we'll no longer need it. And let's shift our focus to the header.js file that is located within the header folder that's inside of the components directory. So let's just begin by adding some simple styling to the header before we add in some functionality. So I'm going to remove the div that's currently listed there and replace it with the header HTML tag. And we'll give the header a class name, a height of 20, a width of full. We want this to be fixed because it's going to remain at the top of the window. We'll say top 0, left 0, transition. We're going to set it to all. And then we want the duration to be 300. And then inside of this div, we're going to pass in a nav tag, and we'll give it a class name. And on large devices, we want the maximum width to be set to large. We'll set the margin to auto so that it is automatically centered. We'll give it a flex, and we want the items to be centered on the x-axis. We'll say justify between so that there is space between each of the div elements. Then we'll set the height to full. That way it takes up the entire height of this particular header viewport. So I'm going to add in header just so we can have something on the screen. And you'll notice that it is overlapping with the page. That is because we set the position to be fixed. But just so that you can see what the header looks like, let's add in a background color of red 300. Save. Now you see what's listed in red is the nav portion of the header. And if we expand out the window, you'll notice that it is only taking up the large width of the overall header. So let's go ahead and remove the header for right now. And I want to add a div, and this div is going to represent the logo of our website. So we'll add some styling to it. So let's give it a class name of padding top of 8. We'll set the padding bottom to 7. We want the items to be centered, and we'll set the gap to 3. We need to bring in our logo, and as I mentioned earlier, within the public directory, I went ahead and added in a logo.png. This is strictly optional. You don't necessarily have to do so. So I don't want to bring this in directly as an image. I actually want to make this a reusable component because I'm going to use this in other spots of the application. So within the root directory, let's add a folder named components. And the reason that I'm placing the logo in this component folder and not the component folder that's within the landing directory is because this directory is going to represent a folder that it will be used throughout the application and not just unique to that particular page. So within the components folder, let's add a file named logo.js. And at the top, we're going to need a few things in order to bring our logo on screen. Let's start by importing image, and this is going to come from Nextjs. Then we'll import link. This is going to come from Nextlink. And of course, we'll need React from React. Now let's create a const name logo. Be sure to export it. Okay. And let's add a return statement. And for right now, let's just add a link that we just imported. And within the link, we'll say logo. We'll need to give it a href. We'll give it a href to be the root directory of back home. We'll hit save. Now let's import this logo inside of the header. That way we'll have something on screen as we are updating it. So at the top of the file, type in import. And what we'll be importing is the logo from @/component/logo. And then inside of the div, let's bring in that logo component that we just imported. We'll hit save. And now you'll notice that we have a logo on screen. So let's go back to the logo file, logo.js file. Underneath the href, let's add a class name, and we'll say flex. We want the item centered, and then we'll hit save. Within the link tag, let's go ahead and bring in the image component that we imported from Nextlink. The source of our image is going to be the logo file that we just imported into the public directory, or that we have within the public directory, I should say. So the source will be /logo.png. We'll give it a height of 100, a width of 100. We'll set the alt to logo, and then we'll close the tag, hit save. And now you'll notice that we have the logo that's within the public directory on screen. So now I want to add the name of the website, but I only want it to be visible on large devices and not small devices. So what I'm going to do is add a span, and we'll call what the website is called the Training Land, and we'll hit save. So now we see the logo name on screen. Within the span, let's add a class name. I'm going to style it first on large devices. We'll set it to block, and we'll set the font to extra bold. Hit save. So now we see that it is the color, well, now we see the font is bolder than it was originally. But as I mentioned, I don't want it visible on smaller devices, so I'm going to add in hidden, because you know with Tailwind, you code as if you are coding for mobile devices first, and then you begin to bring it out to large and medium devices depending upon the viewport. So I'm just going to add the word hidden, and then that's going to hide the Training Land span that we added. But just to make sure that it is working, if we expand out the window, we now see that we have the Training Land listed here on screen. So we know that it is working properly. Great. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to a small viewport, and we can close out the logo for now. So now what we want is to have the links that's going to allow us to link to each section of our landing page. As the user scrolls and takes a look at it, they may want to go to a particular section, and we just want to add the header links right here that'll allow the user to click, and it'll automatically take them to that section of the landing page. So outside of this div, but still within the nav tag, let's add another div, and we'll give it a class name of hidden, because on small devices we won't be able to see it. But for right now, we'll need something on screen, so we'll go flex. We'll set the items to be centered. We'll set the space on the x-axis to 2, and we'll give a little bit of padding on the x of 4. Hit save. Now, instead of hard coding these links directly, I'm going to create a separate component and import them. So within the components directory that's located within the landing organizing folder. Inside of the header folder, let's add a file named headerlinks.js. And this file will host the links that will allow us to navigate to various sections of our landing page. So let's just get something on screen for right now. So I'm going to go import React from React, and we'll go const header links as an arrow function. Be sure to export default the header links, otherwise it won't work. And in a return statement, I'm going to add a div with header links and hit save. Now let's go back to the header.js file and let's import the header links that we just created. So at the top, we'll type import. And then as we begin to type in head, you'll notice that the header links appears, and you'll notice that it's coming from /header-links, and that is because it is within the same directory of the header. So we'll import it. And then within the div, let's go ahead and bring in the header links, hit save, and now you'll notice that it is listed here on screen. But I think what I want is for it to have more space between it versus being directly next to it. So I think what we'll do is, let me see, now flex, justify, here we go, this is why. Justify between, there we go. And perfect. So now, sorry about that typo. I didn't catch that earlier, but it wasn't space between, but now it is space between the logo and the header links. So that's perfect. So now let's shift our focus to the header links file that we just created. And in order for this to come to life, if you will, what we want is to have an array of the routes that's going to allow us to navigate between the sections of our landing page. And then we'll loop over these routes and we'll display them onto the screen. So the first thing we'll need is to care for our imports. And the only import that we're going to need in this file is link. And this is going to come from Nextjs. Then below link, but above the header links arrow function, let's go ahead and create the array named routes. And this will be an array of objects. So the first one will be name, or the key value will be name. And the name of this will be program. And then we'll give it an ID. The ID will be program. And the way this is going to work is we'll loop over the routes within the header links. And for each one, we'll create an individual link. And we'll give it an ID of program. And then within the sections, we'll name the sections based on the ID. That way, when we click on the link, it's going to automatically go to that section that has the corresponding ID. So this is going to care for the program section. We know we have the gallery section and also a calculator section. So I'll go ahead and remove gallery now and replace the ID to be gallery. And then the last one will be calculator. And the name will be calculator. Hit save. Okay. Now we can go ahead and remove the header links. And let's just work starting out with the div. We'll give it a class name of space x4, just to give some space in between each link. Now we need to map over each route, each of the routes within this array, and display a link for each route so that we'll have access to it and we can use it to navigate on the sections within the page. So we'll go routes.map, And we're going to call each item within the array a route. And for each route, we want to display a link. Clean that up a little bit. And within the link, we want to show the route.name. And if we hit save, remember, that's right. Remember, with the link, we have to have an href in order for it to work. So let's just go ahead and add the href now. So we'll need to pass in the href with the curly braces because we need to pass in some JavaScript and we need it to be dynamic. So we'll go temporal literals, $, but before the $, in order for this href to work, we need to add the £, which lets us know, which is going to tell Next and the JavaScript that, hey, this £, has a corresponding ID that we need to link to once we click on it. So we'll add pound, and then inside of the $signs and the curly braces, we'll go route.id, hit save, and then now we see each of the routes being displayed on screen. And what I want is to give each of these links a little hover effect so that on hover, the user can see which link they are hovering over, and it just gives a little better user experience. So in order to accomplish this, I'm going to take advantage of the Tailwind utility function that's going to allow me to create a custom link component, if you will, within Tailwind, so that all I need to do is pass in a class name of whatever I decide to name it, and it's going to automatically have that styling because I do intend to use these links in another space in the application. So in order to update this, let's go within the global.css. And within the global.css, type in @layer utilities. And this is some functionality from Tailwind that allows you to create reusable components, if you will, within the utilities layer so that you can use it throughout the application and reduce some of the redundant code that you may be writing. So the name that I want to create or that I want to give to each of these links is nav. So I'm going to add the name of .nav. And then inside of the curly braces, we're going to go @apply. We're going to go relative, margin left of 10. We'll set the text color to be gray 600. I want my font to be mono, but feel free to set yours whatever you like. We'll set the font styling to extra light. We'll set the tracking to 1 pixel. On hover, I want the text color to be gray 900, and then we'll set cursor pointer. So now to confirm that this is working, what we'll need to do is add the word nav to any class name or any item with the class name that we want to have this functionality. So we know that we want it to be within the links. So I'm within the header links, I'm going to add a class name within the link. And I'm just going to add nav and click save. And you'll notice that the links have updated. The text styling is different. The color is different. And we can actually go ahead and remove the red. That was just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to remove it now. Within the header.js, just back out the background color of red. Excuse me. So now you see the links and you see how this is now a reusable component, just based on the functionality that we have within Tailwind CSS. So now back in the global.css, I'm going to add a .nav, and then we'll say after, and then we'll go @apply. So we want the content to be empty. We want the background color to be purple 200. We'll set the height to 3 pixels. We'll set the width to 100% just so we can have something on screen. Then we'll go left 0 dash bottom 0. Actually, let's set the bottom to 5 pixels. Then we'll say absolute. Rounded will be XL. And we'll set the duration to 300. Just hit save. So now you see we have a underline or a line underneath each of the links. That's perfect. So what we want to do is have it so that on hover, it transitions from the left and we can see which link our cursor is currently under or pointing on based upon the hover effect. So now to update it, we'll go .nav hover and it will say after. And I'll say at apply. And what we want is the width of it to be 100%. And we could change this width to 0%. Let's hit save. You'll notice that the underline is gone, and on hover, we now have a nice underline effect for each of the nav links. Perfect. So now we can go ahead and close out the global.css. We won't need it. What I want to do next is test out the nav links because I see the URL is updated with pound and gallery. And if we click on calculator, we notice that it is updated there, but there's no changing on the page. That is because we haven't added in those components just yet. So just to bring some styling to the page, we can go ahead and close out the header links. And let's just shift our focus to the main directory, and inside of the app folder, landing, then components, let's go ahead and add in these additional sections. So within header, let's add a file named hero.js. Uh-oh, sorry, I think I didn't put a dot. That might be a comma. Hero.js, there we go. And I'm just going to do the RFCE template this time. We'll hit the backspace so that we delete all of the variable or the function names. We'll hit save so we can close out the, I'm sorry. Within the hero, let's just give it a class name of min height screen. We'll set the background color to green, 300. Okay, and we can close this one out. Now let's go to the folder named program, and we'll add a file named program.js. We'll do the RFCE template to create a function, and we'll call this program section. Save the file. So now we're not going to style this section today, but what we do want to do is go ahead and add in the ID so that we have the ability to navigate to this section of the page in the event we click on it. So let's remove this div and replace it with a section HTML tag. And then inside of the section, we'll give it a class name of min height screen. We'll set the background color to, let's go with orange. We'll hit save. And then within the section, let's also add a ID of program. That way, when we click on the program, it goes to that particular section, the program link, excuse me. When we click on the program link, it goes to that section of the landing page. Now let's do the same thing for gallery. So within the gallery folder, let's add a file named gallery.js. We'll do the RFCE template, gallery. Let's remove the div, replace it with the section tag. We'll add an ID of gallery. Give it a class name of min height screen. and we'll set the background color to, let's go with blue 300 is fine. Add the word gallery back within the section and hit save. Last but not least, within the calculator folder, let's add a file named calculator.js. We'll add the RFCE template, replace the calculator with the word calculator. We'll hit save, remove the div, replace it with a section tag. I'll add calculator back in, and then within section, we'll give it an ID of calculator. Class name of min height screen. We'll set the background color of this to, let's go with slate 300. All right, so now let's go ahead and bring in these imports so that we can test out our functionality. And what we want to bring this in at is within the landing page itself. So within the app folder, within landing, click on the file named page.js. We'll begin by updating the section. We're removing the div, replacing it with section. And we'll give it a class name of flex, and then we'll set the direction to column. Okay, so at the top, and I went ahead and just saved the file. So at the top, let's go ahead and bring in our imports. So we'll start by bringing in the header, the hero section. So we'll import hero, and that is coming from _dot/ components. We want to bring in the program section. Then we'll bring in the calculator. And then we'll also bring in the gallery. Okay, so now within the home page, let's bring in the hero first. And you'll notice that this is where the hero is positioned. Then we'll bring in the program section. And now you'll notice that the program section is now listed here. And it doesn't look like I have anything written for program section. Yep. So I'm gonna go back in and just add in the word program section so we can see it on screen. And there you have it. We'll close it out. Now I'll bring in the calculator. Save the file, and we see calculator. Last but not least, we'll bring in the gallery. Perfect, and we see the gallery. Now let's test out this functionality to make sure that it works. So when I click on program, what I'm hoping is that it'll go to the program section. So I'll click on it now. And as you see, it is going to the program section. And I click on gallery, it does the same thing. And when I click on calculator, it does the same thing. So perfect. We can go ahead and close out the page.js for right now. And let's go back into the components directory and let's click on header. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to set the background color of this header to be white, but on scroll, I want the header to be transparent so that the user has the ability to navigate back to the top of the screen, and also they can click on different sections based upon their viewing desire, if you will. So in order to accomplish this, I'm going to need to take advantage of some state management within React. So the first thing I'm going to do is at the top of this file, I'm going to add in use client because I'm going to need to make this a client-side file. Then we're going to import a few things from React to help us out. So right here, we'll go with use state to help manage the state of our application or of the header, and also use effect to kind of take care of the interactivity, if you will. So now within the header function, let's create the state variable name is at top, and then we'll say set is at top equal to use state, And then the initial state of this is going to be true because the header is going to start out at the top of the window. So let's create a function named handle scroll. And this will be a arrow function. And within it, we're going to say if the window scroll Y is equal to 0, meaning that if the window is at the top, we're going to say set is at top to be true. Else, we'll say set is at top to be false. Let's click save. Okay, now we'll need to handle the functionality since we've defined the function itself. So this is where use effect is going to come in. So we'll say use effect, and then we'll say window.add event listener. If we scroll, then we want to ignite the handle scroll function. Then we'll say return. We'll go window.remove event listener on scroll, and then we'll say handle scroll because that's what we want to pass in. So basically what this is saying is that anytime we listen for the event scroll, which is within JavaScript, that's when we're taking advantage of this add event listener. We want to call this handle scroll function that we just created. So now to bring it to life and to bring it all together, we'll need to update this header in order for it to work. So I'm going to bring the closing tag down, and I'm actually just going to copy the code within this class name and delete it. And instead of the quotations there for the class name, we need to pass in something dynamic. So we're going to pass in, we want to use the brackets. We'll start with the temporal literals. Then I'm going to paste in the code that I just copied. And then right after the duration of 300, I'm going to add in a $sign and a bracket, because here's where we'll need to pass in some dynamic information. So we're going to say if is at top, which is the state variable. If we are at the top, I want the background to be white. I want there to be a border bottom of 2, and we could set the border color to slate 300. I'll just make it 200. And if we aren't at the top, then I want the background to be transparent. Let's go ahead and hit save. And now you see we have a background color. And when we scroll, the background color is gone. If I click on the logo, it takes me back to the top of the page. Click on calculator, we get the hover link, and you see the word calculator there. The background is transparent. We click on gallery, we get the same thing. We click on program, we get the same thing. Outstanding. So that means this is working as designed. So the last thing I want to do is I want to actually have a responsive navbar, excuse me, so that when we're in this view, a small view, we don't see these links. We actually see a menu button. And if you remember in the demonstration, this is what it looked like. We just gave it a simple transition from framermotion. Okay, so we want to emulate that into our project now. So what we'll do is, outside of this div that is currently holding the links, I'm going to add another div. And for right now, let's do this. Within the header folder, let's add a file named mobilemenu.js. We'll add the RFCE template and we'll replace it with mobile menu, having both M's be capital. And then back within the header.js, let's go ahead and import it. So we'll say the less than sign mobile, And as you begin to type it out, you have the ability to just tab down and enter and bring it in. Give it the self-closing tag. And now you see the mobile menu is listed here to the far right. And the nav links are in the middle because we set the flex to justify between. But what I want is these links to not be visible on small devices and only be visible on large. And I want the inverse for this. So in order to make that happen, we'll need to go back to the nav links, to the div that is holding it. And let's type in some code. Let's type in hidden. So that the initial state is hidden. And then on large devices, we'll say we want flex. And on large devices, we want the item centered. So if we hit save, we notice that it is no longer there. But just to make sure it didn't go anywhere, if we expand the window out, we see that the links are still present. They're just not present on the small viewport, only on large viewports only. So we want to do the same thing, but inverse for the mobile menu. So we'll give this a class name of padding on the X of 4 so that we get some padding here. Then we'll say block because we want it to be a direction of flex, so we could just add block. And then on large devices, we want it hidden because we won't need a mobile menu on a large device. So now let's test this out by expanding out the window. You see that we no longer have the mobile menu there. We are back to just having our nav links and the logo on the far left. Perfect. So now when we go back to a small viewport, we now have the mobile menu present again, which is what we want. So now we can shift our focus to, because we won't need the header.js file anymore, we could just shift our focus to the mobile menu. So we'll need a few things in order to get our mobile menu designed and functioning the way that we want. We'll need a few imports. So the first thing we'll need is React icons to give us the representation of a menu icon. So we'll install that in just a moment. And we'll also need framermotion as well, which is going to just give a little bit more spring or interactivity to the menu as it shifts from the left side of the window, which we can do without the framermotion, but I just want to add it just to give it a little more effect. So within the terminal, let's go to File, Terminal, and we can go to New Terminal. And then at the bottom, it should automatically bring up a new terminal for you to click on while the other one is still running. Let's type in npm React icons for the React icon library. And then let's also type in framer-motion for framermotion, which is going to help us with the activity of the website. Go ahead and click on Enter. And we'll give it a moment or two to install. Okay. So we can go ahead and close out the terminal because we don't need it right now. Then at the top of the mobile menu file, let's go ahead and start by bringing in use client. And we'll need a few imports. The first one we'll need is use state, which is going to manage the state of the menu. Okay, underneath that one, let's bring in motion. And this one is going to come from framermotion. We'll need some icons. So we'll say import brackets, and then we'll say from space, quotations, React icons. And I want to use the FI, use whichever ones you like. And we'll need the menu and the FIX. Let's go ahead and bring in link from next link. And then we'll also import logo, which is the logo that we created. We're going to bring it in and utilize it within the mobile menu as well. Okay. So we can go ahead and click save to save those imports. So now we could use the same links that we've already created and just import them, but I think it'll be designed a little better if we use the routes and then just create the import, or excuse me, then create the routes or the links based on the route individually, not using the actual file that we created earlier. So let's go within the header links file and let's just go ahead and copy the routes array. and close it out. And then we're going to paste it in right above the mobile menu component, or the right above the mobile menu function. Then within the mobile menu, we'll need to start out by capturing some state. And we're going to say, if the menu is open, we're going to say is open. And then we'll say set is open. And that's going to be equal to use state. And the initial state of it is false. We do not want it open initially. And all we need to do is create a simple function named toggle menu, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it toggle menu. And then within it, we're going to say set is open. And then we're just going to change it from not is open. And then we'll hit save. Okay. So now we are ready to begin to style the mobile menu. So we could just remove the initial div, or you could have kept it, I guess. And I'm just going to replace it and give it a class name of relative. Then within the div, we'll need a button, which is going to represent the menu icon itself. So within the button, we're going to say is open. If it, and this, we're just using a little bit of JavaScript. So we'll say curly brackets is open. And if it is open, we want to show the X, because that's going to help us close it. We'll give it a, actually we can do a size. We'll say size of 24. And then we'll give it the closing tag. And if it is not open, outside of the parentheses, we'll add the semicolon. And if it is not open, we want to show the FI menu icon, and we'll set the size to 24. Let's hit save. And then now you see it is a menu icon, because it is not open, we're only seeing the menu icon and we're not seeing the X. No errors, so this is working perfectly. Great. Now underneath the div, let's go ahead, and here's where we want to bring in a little bit of frame of motion to kind of help transition the menu on screen. So underneath the closing div of the, underneath the closing of tag of the button, let's add in a new tag of div, but instead of div, let's put motion.div, which is going to indicate that this is going to be using some frame of motion. And then within the motion.div, let's start out by giving it some styling. I'm going to pass this one in dynamically, so we'll use the brackets for class name, and we'll also use the temporal literals. And let's just say fixed, give it a position of fixed. We'll say top of 0, left of 0. The height is going to take up the full width of the screen. The width is going to take up 2/3. We'll set the background color to white. We'll give it a border right, and we'll set the border to slate 200 to keep it consistent. We'll give it a Z index of 40 because we want it to stand out on the page. We'll give it a flex. Well, we'll also add flex, and we'll set the direction to column. We'll hit save. So now you see the border on screen. So now let's add in some framer motion functionality so that we can give it the ability to transition. So the initial state, we want to set it to, on the x-axis, we want it to be minus 100%. Hit save. We'll set animate. We'll say on the X, if it is open, we want it to be 0, or we want it to be negative 100% if it is not open. Minus 100%. Hit save. So now what this is saying is that the initial state of this sidebar is going to be negative 100%, meaning it is all the way off the screen. If the state is stating that it is now open, then we're going to transition it to 0. Otherwise, it's going to go back to being the initial state, which is minus 100%. Okay, so now we'll need to add in the transition. And I'm going to set the type to spring. And there are several different types of transitions that you can take advantage of. I would recommend going to the framermotion website and just seeing what type of transition works best for you. But I'm going to add the type of this application to be spring and the stiffness to be 300. We'll click save. So now that we have this code updated, I'm just going to put test here. I want to have the ability to toggle this menu, and in order to do so, we'll need to add in the toggle menu function, and we're going to add this to our button. So we'll take advantage of some JavaScript within the button, and we'll pass in an on-click handler, and the function we're going to give it is the toggle menu function. So if we click the button, we now see it is transitioning on screen. And I just gave it a little bit of life by giving it a little animation as we transition on. This website is going to be a little more animated as we begin to add in more of the full stack functionality, our dashboard, etc., etc. So this goes in line with the design of the website. So perfect. So now that we have the transition functionality cared for, let's go ahead and add in some styling. So within the motion.div, let's add another div. And we'll give it a class name of flex. We'll set the items to be centered. We'll have everything within the center. So we'll set justify the center. We'll set the height to 20. We'll give it a border bottom. And we'll say the border color is going to be slate 200. And what this is representing, this is going to represent the logo section or the header section of the nav menu. So now if I go ahead and import the logo, and I'm going to use the shortcut to do so by typing the less than sign, capital L for logo, LGO, and you'll see that it will automatically populate for you, and it is coming from @components. But we've actually already imported it in. So now we'll just close out the logo, tag, click save, and you see we now have the logo presented on screen within the nav menu. So that is absolutely perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close it out. And then outside of that div, I'm going to add another HTML tag. This time it's going to be a nav tag because this is going to hold the nav links. So within nav, I'm going to give it a class name of flex grow. Flex, and we want to set the direction to column. We want the item centered. We'll give it justify center, and we'll say space on the Y of 4. And then what we want to do is we basically want to loop over this routes array and present it on screen the same way we did for the header, except that this time it's going to be a direction of a column versus a row. So we actually could just copy from the other file, but I'm just going to retype it in. It's good practice. So we'll say routes.map, and for each of the routes we're going to name it route, and for each one we want to display a link. We'll give it a key of route.id, a href. Remember that one it needs to be dynamic, so it's going to have temporal literals, $, $, brackets, and then we're going to say route.id. We'll give this link a class name of nav because we want it to have the same functionality. And then within the link, we'll pass in route.name so that we can see the name of each route presented within the menu. So if we click on the menu again, we see that we now have the links displayed on screen, and as we hover over them, they have the same link behavior that we are expecting. So the last thing that I want is to have a footer at the bottom of this menu. This is strictly optional. You don't have to have it. So underneath the closing nav, I'm going to add footer. Let's give it a class name of border top. I want the border color to be slate 200. We'll say padding of 4, and we'll set the text to center. There we go. I'm just going to say footer for right now, just to get something on screen. And let me bring this up a little bit because you probably can't see it. All right, so let's go ahead and replace the foo for right now with a p tag. We'll give it a class name of text small. We'll set the font to be extra bold. I want the tracking to be the widest. And then inside of the p tag, I'm going to add at 2024 the training land. Hit save. And now you see we have a footer within our nav menu, just indicating that that's the name of our website. So great. And if we expand this out, we see that the mobile menu isn't there. We still have the hover effect. It is redirecting to the appropriate section based on what we click. And as the viewport changes, we now have a mobile menu, and we appear to be within a certain section. So if we click on the logo, it takes us back to the top. And just to test out the links, if we click on program, it moves to the program section. Click on gallery, calculator, etc. Great. So we have now built and designed the navbar or header for our full stack application. This is going to be the header for the landing page. Next up, we'll work on our hero section and also add in framermotion to bring some life and a little bit of design to the page as well.